Welcome back to One Winning Pod, where somehow, some way, the Ravens found a way to lose what I would consider the first real loss. Just totally kind of outplayed in many regards in this game. Although they were up for 59 minutes and like 20 seconds of the game, they did not manage to be ahead when the clock struck zero, which is what matters. So we got beat in the fourth quarter again, lost a 14-point lead, and Cleveland now is right at our heels in the AFC North. It makes the division much more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about as sobering as a way you could put it without getting too emotional about it. Definitely an incredibly frustrating loss. It did not help that that was at home to a divisional rival, the Cleveland, nonetheless. The Ravens are 0-2 so far in their matchups with Deshaun Watson as a starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. You don't like to see that. And just a game that, started off looking like it was going to be an easy roll. Very similar to the Colts game, very similar to the Steelers game. And once again, we're in that spot. And it's the stuff we talked about in the preview episode that we hoped the Ravens would look out for, that this Browns team was going to come to fight. They did. We said that this isn't a game that the Ravens could look past to Cincinnati on. I'm not sure if that's what happened there, but it certainly did seem like it was not an effort put out by the Ravens. It seemed like it was their all, in my opinion. And you had a couple quotes come out after the game from younger guys like Kyle Hamilton and Justin Madubuike that make you scratch your head as far as what the total effort was in that game for the Ravens. So, yeah, frustrating loss overall. Not much more to be said there. Just a bummer game, and the Ravens are going to have to flush it quickly because you got a very important home game against Cincinnati, who also had their own emotional loss over the weekend in just a few days.
Yeah, it seems like this is a story of the 2023 Ravens. Just blow out good teams, lose to ones. Pardon my French, but yeah, I mean, obviously the Browns played well. I think their personnel, I think, matched up well. Kind of bullied the Ravens around a bit. Kind of beat them at their own game, to be honest. I mean, even at the end of the day, I think Watson did have a good second half, but you take some of those away, I think he looks very underwhelming. That first half from him was just atrocious. So, yeah, a little bit more competent play from the defense in the second half. I think that game is easily in the Ravens' favor. Certainly the offense, I think there was a lot to be desired as well. Things were not clicking as they usually were. But yeah. At the end of the day, man, losses suck. We talk about loss tokens. You only have so many of them. It really sucks to kind of leave them out there for a team like Cleveland. That's it. Walking back to the car after that. Like, I mean, I could tell like everybody in the car, like we were just pissed. Like we were like, what did we just see?
Man.
Even correspondent K-Fish, man, I bless his soul. I feel like when you're going in the car, I felt like speeding a little bit. I was like, oh, he's ready to go home. Like, yeah, I can feel that energy. I was just like, yeah, nobody likes this,
man. And what's worse is the lost token tax collector has come around and like taking an extra lost token from everybody because the dang division's too good. You're not allowed to lose that many games. Like we're trying to get, first place, a home game. First place in the AFC would be nice, but it's tough. It's really tough this year. There's a lot of, luckily a lot of teams that are beating up on each other. There's a lot of good teams, and that results in, kind of depressed records. But this is tough. And going back to your point, Chris, about Watson, what a tale of two games. The first 9 passes, he had 19 yards and only 1 completion. And then the second half, he was literally perfect. 14 for 14, 134 yards, 16 rushing yards, and a touchdown. And that's tough. I mean, the way that the defense just completely folded in the second half is incredible, honestly. There were several third downs, and every single one of them were completed. They never didn't score on a drive. They always scored. And that's not winning football. Yoshi sent this in our chat, and I want to give him credit because he looked them all up. But he had a 3rd and 4th, a 3rd and 11th, a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, a 3rd and 2, and they failed 3rd and 1, but they got the 4th. And then they only had the kneel they took at the end of the fourth quarter on 3rd down where they didn't succeed, but then they kick a field goal. So that's kind of succeeding when you're winning. So Yeah, tough times, man. Like that's just the defense here, man. It's a story, I feel like, of the whole game. They just weren't able to keep up the intensity.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of baffling, right? Like you said, Watson's first half was just atrocious. There's no other way to put it. The very first throw that he had in the game, I mean, gosh, that's a highlight for the ages for Kyle Hamilton right there. That was straight out of Ed Reed's playbook. Got in the line of fire, jumped in front of it, batted it up, picked it up, and just ran in for the touchdown. And it looks like, that was going to be the story of the game. Just the Ravens defense just bullying the Browns, having their way. But the thing with this Browns team and the thing with any team going forward, and the Ravens are just going to have to realize this, is, there's some teams that'll pack it in after you go up big and other teams that are going to keep fighting. And the Browns they were not budging that entire game. Watson just kept throwing the balls till they stuck. And that's what happened in the second half. And, I certainly hope in the team meetings this week, the coaches, the vets on the squad, there's a gut check there, to just kind of just look at like, hey, how'd this happen? What is it that we did? Was this an effort question? Was this an execution question? Was this just, the expectation that we were going to steamroll these guys and they just kept playing and just never laid down dead? Because this loss to me comes down more to execution than the Browns winning the game. Again, not to discount what they did, because they did play very well throughout the game. But I feel like if the Ravens had played 4 quarters, and I don't think they did, they would have come out with the game with at least a 3-point win.
Yeah, I know on the defensive side of the ball, I thought in the first half, obviously you mentioned the Hamilton interception. What a great way to start the game. But for the most part, I felt like in the first half, things were there, right? Obviously, like you talked about Watson's completion percentage, I mean, it was atrocious in the first half. I think the only thing that was really a little bit of a concern that kept some drives alive was collapsing the pocket. I mean, we talked about how good this defensive line has been and just surrounding the quarterback and getting a ton of sacks. They did get a few sacks, but there were so many instances of just, everyone going around the tackles and leaving the middle of the pocket wide open, and Watson being able to pick up first downs with his legs. And to me, that was something that was clear of like, okay, whatever the Ravens are doing here is not working. We need to, have a spy or, do something to be able to, limit Watson's ability to escape. And it was a little bit concerning to me because it seemed to get worse in the second half. Watson was still escaping the pocket. And not only that, but he was being more accurate. And then now you're kind of, you're suffering in both ways. And I felt like that was a mismatch. I think the Ravens just, they weren't able to take advantage of it. And it stinks because it seemed very obvious from the first half. It's like you shut that down, the back end keep playing the way it did, and you come out of that game with a win. But, whatever they did or whatever they didn't do in that second half, I think that was a big key of the game. And I mean, given this defense, given what they've done so far this year, like, I mean, frankly, it's unacceptable. And I think the guys are going to think that too. They got to limit it, and they got to think fast, because the Bengals are going to be a totally different challenge coming in this week, and going to be a lot more explosive. So you think the Browns did damage now? I think the Bengals have the capability to do a lot more.
One thing that I noticed that I thought was really interesting with the Browns is that they used extra linemen often. They had their backup center playing fullback and also just lining up sometimes as like a tight end essentially, and then they went double heavy once. As well. And I felt like these lineups were particularly effective. They were just winning the physicality matchup in the trenches. And I thought that was indicative of how they weren't able to, convert these third and shorts, or the defense wasn't able to stop them on third and short. They were able to always get, just a couple yards, not that much, but enough to get a new set of downs and live another day. And I thought that was really interesting to see because no one's really tried to do that against the Ravens so far. The reason they're being so successful this year is that they're able to defend the run really effectively out of the nickel. And it seems as though, I think they did, when they brought an extra lineman, they went into base, but even still, they just weren't able to actually, manage things. And I thought that was interesting. We know that the Browns have a good front, offensive line, but they were missing their tackles. And I thought that this would have been a different outcome. And I think it's definitely disappointing. And honestly, when Matabike he seemed offended when they asked, like, were you out physical to the trenches? And I'm like, dude, like, I don't know. I think your coaches might tell you were. Like, I don't know, man. Like, there was some push there. I think that we gotta clean it up, man. Like you said, not too far. The Bengals will be here, just a few hours, honestly. So gotta get cleaned up.
Yeah, I mean the fortunate thing is, and I kind of mentioned this in the group chat before, but the Browns' offense and their personnel is definitely unlike a lot in the league. Honestly, I mean, you think about it, they kind of copied the Ravens' offense under Greg Roman and said, hey, we're going to go heavy and we're going to rely on a really good run game. Built around a guy called Nick Chubb. Probably heard of him. He's pretty good. Obviously, he's not playing right now because of his injury, but still, the roster remains like that. So they've got a lot of guys, really heavy guys. They want to beat you in heavy personnel. They've got some big tight ends as well. And, I can understand, the Ravens, they've haven't lost to those teams historically, right? They've lost to the teams that are more explosive, the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Bills, I guess, to some extent. And so I can understand, we don't have to craft a roster to be able to fight that. But that is kind of the good news, right? If that was part of the, struggles for this Ravens team this week, there aren't that many more teams like that they have to face, even in the playoffs. See what happens with the Browns and everything. But the Browns are probably the only team in the league that I can think of that really plays that type of offense. So on the bright side, it didn't look great, but, it might not happen again if that was primarily the issue. I think the only thing that kind of puts me, would make me more concerned is if we start to see, hey, we're still having tackling issues. Hey, we're still letting these teams in. Which I guess, to be fair, other two losses were kind of like that, I guess. But I'm willing to kind of chalk this one up to, I do think that the physicality aspect of it was huge. Two plays in particular that I just want to mention real quick. One play where it ended up being a roughing the passer on Van Noy. Van Noy got lit up by Cedric Tillman on a block, and he was just down for a few seconds. Eventually did get up and then hit Watson and then got roughing the passer. But that was not a play that I was like, not expecting. And that other play where Njoku got free and was just pushing Stone back. I mean, like that textbook, like out physical. There are a handful of plays, I think, like that throughout the game that, frankly, I mean, that's what the tape don't lie. So,
yeah, I mean, it was a very physical matchup. And we can play, I think it's a good point to point out that, hey, look, the Browns, they run a very different game than pretty much everyone else in the NFL does. My counter to that, though, is like, maybe they were a little heavier today than they've been in the past few years, but they've always been heavy. That's what they've been doing the past 5-6 years. I feel like we should have had a better counter to that. Again, we didn't highlight it in the preview to what I can remember, but it does feel kind of obvious. Like, hey, your tackles are backups in this game. You're going to be bringing in extra blockers, right? The big tight ends. Try something unique to help those guys out. But yeah, I mean, for me, this game, I think we can keep talking the X's and O's, and there's a lot to talk about that's worth it. But the main thing, I think, just comes down to just lack of effort. Tackling has not been an issue for the most part this year, and just everyone was missing tackles in the second half, like you were just mentioned there. And it is interesting, a couple weeks ago, Chris, after the Cardinals game, I think you brought up, in retrospect, a really good point. At the time, I wasn't quite sure if I bought it, but you mentioned like, hey, McBride had a really big game for Arizona against us. Is that showing that maybe there's a weakness in this defense in covering the tight end? And looking back on the tape, I was like, well, a lot of the looks that he got, he was pretty wide open, and when he was contested, we did a decent job with defending it. But I think this game showed that there's something to that the Ravens really haven't been challenged that much by the tight end this year, aside from Arizona and this game with Njoku. Njoku himself, you could argue, is the single reason that the second half happened for the Browns, because all of his catches, they weren't far down the field. The average depth of target on those were not very long. Just a bunch of broken tackles, bunch of yak yards, bunch of just plowing through defenders. And you got guys like Roquan Smith missing tackles. That's never going to be a recipe for success. So, going forward, I haven't taken a deep dive into what the Ravens tight end schedule looks like from the opposition going forward. But I think that's another thing that has kind of been exposed over the past couple of weeks as an area of improvement that this team needs to make, which is figuring out a more surefire way of keeping receiving tight ends in check.
Again, credit to Yoshi for coming up with it, but the air yards were just out of control for Njoku. I mean, 13, 10, 19, 12. Like, that's just unreal. And that was, I think, one of the biggest, like you said, one of the biggest reasons we struggled in this matchup. And also, like, I thought, kind of talking about tight ends, this is safety work. Chris pointed out, too, when we were at the game. It seemed like Williams was not on his assignments as well. We kind of lost whatever magic was going on back there and how well they were handing off the zones. And honestly, the stats show it in a way that are kind of impressive. Looking at Ken's breakdown on Film Study, in standard nickel, we only gave up 0.9 yards per play. Those are the packages with Millett on the field. Obviously, the smaller sample size, only 13 plays, but 49 plays in big nickel, it was 6.5 yards per play. And that's kind of what got us, I feel like. Part of me wonders if he's just not ready to be back out there.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll go either way. I was surprised you brought that up. I was debating on whether to bring that up in my head now or just maybe wait until another week. But I mean, obviously he's been out of the lineup a lot this year. Tons of different injuries. So I think you have to have a little bit of time for him to get acclimated again, just get himself comfortable as he can be with all the injuries they have this year, by the way. But yeah, just I feel like in a game where we're giving up so much yak and tackling is poor, obviously he wasn't the only guy to have concerns with, right? I think Hamilton missed a few, although I think in general it looked pretty good. Stone was okay, although obviously getting pushed back by Njoku on that one play, not great. But yeah, Williams right now just plays these very deep shells, which makes sense. He's still has some good range back there. I think he can make the play on the ball, but I think that's just it. I think because of all of his injuries right now, I mean, frankly, playing soft a little bit. I think he's just, not going up to make tackles. I think he'll be in position, but then, if you're, a yard off from your guy and you're letting him run by you, like that's yak. You got to, if you're a safety playing 15 yards off the ball, you go up there and you put a shoulder in him, you wrap up, you make that tackle, you prevent any yak from anymore. But there are just tons of plays like that where I'm just like, man, like healthy Marcus, you would have made that play, but injured Marcus, I don't love it. Like if he has to be the last guy on the field, I think maybe he could do something, but I feel like right now he's kind of slowing some guys down, but he's not going to be the one to make a tackle. And it's really unfortunate. I'm just wondering, over the next couple of weeks, like, is it going to get better or, I'm honestly just wondering if he gets another injury and at this point and, the Ravens just decide to shut him down because, I'm not sure how much, better he's going to get this year with everything he's got.
It's an interesting call, right? I mean, because when he first got this injury, we talked the timetable. I mean, based on what we saw others who have knowledge of that. I mean, none of the three of us have, actual medical knowledge. None of us went to medical school. But from what I can recall, what we were talking about, the general timetable for this injury was going to put him back on the field in what was it, early to mid-December, right? So that timetable didn't magically get sped up. That's not how the healing process works. He's playing still injured. He's found some method that's helping him work that out. But yeah, he's not going to be at 100%. And I can understand Marcus's desire to be on the field with the guys, of course. I mean, he's on the sideline. He's watching this defense be, in most cases dominant from a secondary perspective. He's watching Geno Stone lead the league in interceptions. I mean, he doesn't want to. That's the tough part there of the NFL. He's got the big contract, but he's still got to go out there and produce. So people, coaches still know he can do it. But if I'm the coaching staff, I feel like, with how our defense has been playing, how Geno's been able to pick up the slack, it feels like we're afforded the luxury of letting him rehab and get his body 100% for a playoff stretch, in my opinion. Now, I'm not actually making the calls, so I can't, look at it at more than a hypothetical. But yeah, it feels like in a situation where your backup has stepped in and performed as well as you could have hoped, in that case, there really shouldn't be a need to rush him back outside of course, Marcus's understandable desire to get back out there on the field and compete as soon as he can.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, it's tricky. At the end of the day, you got to get him out there at some point. So, whether it's now or against the Bengals or whatever the next game is after that, like the Rams game or whatever, like just pick one, right? Like if this is if he just needs a game or two or however many to be able to get some of the rust off and feel a little bit more comfortable playing through the injury, knowing that he could take a few hits and feels okay, like just pick a game, right? But yeah, I'm just I'm worried that basically like one more, it's like you shut down for good this year. I mean, and frankly, I mean, you start to really have the conversation about contract and when can we cut the guy, because it has been 2 years in a row with lots of injuries, and credit to him, like personally, like playing through that, like that takes a lot of guts, a lot of toughness. So absolutely no no shade being thrown in terms of like just physical ability and just being able to get out there, like it's admirable. But just from like just from a team perspective and just what we're seeing on the field, it's just like you're looking at him and you're like, man, like still really hobbled. Like, it's a shame. It's a shame we're not getting the full 100% Marcus.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to have him for a little bit. The way the contract's structured, it's not pretty. At least one more year. So it's. I mean, I'm not even trying to.
Oh well,
get rid of him. It's just
before I move off that, I have to step in here and say that you're not cutting.
Yeah, you're
Marcus
not
Williams.
cutting him. And financially, or I think as a player. But yeah, it's just frustrating whenever deals happen like this.
Just want to make sure we're clear about that before going forward, because as great as Geno Stone has been, like Marcus Williams will be even better whenever he's healthy again and ready to go, in my opinion. Now, maybe you could make the argument that like, Geno's on a smaller contract and fake some way to move on from Marcus from that perspective. But I mean, yeah, ceiling wise, Marcus, even though right now it's not it because he's not 100%, like this guy has played very well. He played very well last year when he was healthy. So just want to make sure that we're not.
Yes, I hear what you're saying, and like, yes, if he's healthy, like, yes, I want a healthy Marcus Williams, but it's all moot. It depends on like the contract situation anyway. Like if there was an out next year, they were like, oh, well, you save this much money, and
there's just not.
It's
an
option.
Literally
like,
$7 million against.
Just knowing. So. Yeah. So like, if that's the case, not even worth it.
Yeah, so you're gonna keep him next year for sure, but. The year after that, I guess it's like a little bit of a conversation. Save $5 million, but it's not much of a conversation. It's not until the last year. But anyways, like,
yeah,
I don't know. It's interesting to me. I think I was thinking about this today. I'm not sure what they can learn from this game exactly, other than like, hey, like maybe keep being physical the whole game. Like I don't know. Like that's the zones getting handed off. Gotta clean that up. I don't know if there's any like major learnings or schematic things that we need to do other than just, I think as Peter said at the top, execute better. It's just a bummer, Owe almost saved the day. He almost saved the game. We've been talking about that with all praises with that strip sack, something we were kind of hoping would happen based on their tackle situation. And Teller just falls on it. And it was one of those days. And I don't know. Yeah, I'm hoping they have a big bounce back. But against the Bengals, it's all going to be tempered. It's all going to be relative.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing here is I agree. This singular game, like we said, this is the first bad game the defense has played all year. And it was really just a bad half, right? The second half of the game. What you're going to have to see going forward is did the Ravens show anything here that the Bengals are able to exploit, right? If we see some of the same problems that we saw in the second half come in the Bengals game, then you're starting to get a trend, right? One game, I mean, of course we're getting emotional about this game, and you see all the emotional takes come out afterward, and I'm not going to tell anyone how to feel because I don't know how this season is going to end, but at the moment, I'm looking more at the whole of what this defense has done this year, and I think that they've shown that they have a winning formula in place. Um, and it just feels like, yeah, you just gotta execute for 4 quarters. And like you said, even with that effort, they still almost stole the win. But yeah, I mean, even if they did still come out with the win in this game in the end, it's still a lesson in just making sure that you have the execution for 4 quarters. And even when you get up big, which this team can do, you still got to be wary until it's late in the fourth quarter.
Well, it's probably as good a time as any to go over the offense because I think, that kind of ties into a lot of things we have talked about with the offense. They can get up big, keeping the lead sometimes a little bit difficult. And, something in the second half where I think the first half they got up big and scored a lot of points. Second half, they did have a little bit of scoring, but I think at the very end, especially the fourth quarter, just not doing enough in terms of the run game to be able to grind out enough clock. You basically give the ball back to Cleveland, and at that point, they have all the time on their side. They end up, going marching down the field and kicking a field goal as time expired. Ravens didn't have any more timeouts, so I think I feel like there's a lot I think to kind of learn from this game. I think statistically, just wasn't super great for everybody. Lamar obviously had 2 interceptions this game, which didn't really look that great overall. Running game was outside of Keaton Mitchell. Even Gus, I think, didn't have that many yards per carry. Justice Hill didn't even have that many carries at all. And, receiving game, yeah, the yards look a little bit higher, but, overall, I guess, there are a lot of plays left on the field. So, I don't know. Yeah, it was one of those where I feel like the offensive execution, honestly, it really felt like a game where, if the offense plays on schedule, even if the defense wasn't playing too well, it really doesn't matter. Yeah, I think there's a lot from execution we could look at here too.
I guess actually one thing I wanted to add real quick going to the defense is that Marlon isn't as hurt, hopefully, as was originally feared when he fell off the field. There is correlation to him getting injured and the score getting racked up, but I don't really think it was because of Yasin or Darby's ability to play. I mean, I think it was all Yasin for what it's worth. Let me just double check. Yeah. It was all Yasin, not Darby. It was interesting, I feel like. But anyways, yeah, I hope we dodged one there. Obviously, it seems like it's day-to-day calf strain and not going to be the end of the world. But going back to the offense, man, sheesh. I don't even know what to say about that either. It's another kind of weird game. The biggest surprise to me, I think, was Mark Andrews kind of being not a major factor in this game. He usually owns them, and he only had that one big catch. It was a great catch. We thought that was going to be the activation of Mark Andrews, and then that was kind of it.
Yeah, there were other opportunities. There were other opportunities where he was open, but there was other opportunities where other receivers were open too. And I mean, I haven't even done that much of a look back, but the problem in this game was just the Ravens just could not get a solid pockets for Lamar to throw. The same pockets that he had against Seattle, against Detroit, they just weren't there all day. The Browns' defensive line, their front seven, they were in the backfield constantly. Even when Lamar tried to scramble, there was not much room for that there. It just was a really poor showing. I mean, this line already had Morgan Moses out going into the game. Makari did a fine job, but certainly he got bullied some as well. And then Zeitler went out as the game went on. Stanley obviously was out before that, so you had Falele in there. It just, as the game went on, just the protection just got worse and worse. And I mean, you just look at it right there. The injuries just way too many. And, obviously Lamar still has to throw the football even when the protection's not there, but it's just a lot harder to do. Look at any quarterback in the league. They struggle. Everyone's going to do worse when they're under pressure. And that when you're looking at the struggles for this offense in this game, that's what you got to look at first. Just unfortunately, despite the fact that the offensive line did a certainly fine job in Cleveland earlier this year, that was more of an even footing matchup, I'd say. The Browns defense definitely got the upper hand in the matchup in the trenches this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge bummer. I mean, the Ravens know the formula to beat this Browns defense is you have to have a good running game. You get to push those guys back, take Garrett out of the play completely, make him a non-factor, and just tire those guys out. And really, honestly, I mean, kudos to Cleveland for really tightening things up. When you look at the game prior to this one, Ravens were very successful in the run game. This one, I mean, Gus Edwards, 11 carries, 24 yards. I mean, that's very uncharacteristic of Gus. Justice Hill, 2 carries, 7 yards. I mean, Keaton Mitchell had the one big run, but otherwise only had 3 carries on the day, which some people I think have asked about why do you only get 3 carries, but whatever. But yeah, it felt like they didn't really have any success on the ground game. And the other thing too, I feel like another way to kind of beat them back is, being able to hit some deep shots. Like, you don't have to hit them consistently. And obviously it's really difficult just dealing with their pass rush. You can't hit on many of them, but even hitting a couple of deep shots to be able to stretch their defense out and push them back, make them play back a little bit more. Another way to beat this defense. And, that's a little bit of concern with mine. I know I talked to you guys about that before of, the only consistent thing I think I'm seeing with the offense, or I guess consistent thing I'm not seeing with the offense, is the deep passing game. And it gives me a little bit of worry. That's, the one thing consistently throughout this whole season, Lamar's been pretty inaccurate in the deep passing game. And it just hasn't felt like we've had those explosive plays in the passing game. Obviously with Keaton, his last 2 weeks, I think we have that explosive element in the run game, and that's great. But from a deep passing game, just haven't been connecting on a lot of those plays. And I really felt like this game could have used 1 or 2 of them to really open things up. And, unfortunately, without a consistent run game, you end up with this offense that, can score at times and other times just stall out.
Yeah, I think it's important we really narrow the definition here of we're talking about long air yard throws. Because the Ravens, stat collectors out there will be like, the Ravens are doing great in explosive play rate. But the problem is, explosive plays don't mean, a dump off the Gus Edwards that goes, the distance.
Or a slant to OBJ.
Yeah, we're talking here about the long air yard passes.
Yeah.
It's just been slightly off the mark. And very painful, too, because I think there's a couple things at play here. So you had the miss to Zay, maybe missed by a yard or 2. That would have been a touchdown, and what happened that drive? Well, unfortunately, a field goal got blocked. So that was a swing of 7 points. And that really hurts, obviously, but I think what hurts even more, and maybe plays into why the run game was so terrible, only 60-some yards if you take out the one Keaton run, is that I think teams know we're not going to try to do long passes when there's pressure. So what I've noticed is there's been a couple times where Lamar has a guy, but he doesn't with his last second of a clean pocket, he doesn't just launch it and hope for the best. He tries to create with his feet, which is fine. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like he's not willing to pull the trigger on long pass plays unless they've really developed. This is something I've kind of noticed. I feel like he knows that he might be able to create with his feet. So rather than taking a low percentage pass, he doesn't throw it there. But I think it also devalues that attempt and makes the defense not be they're not being as honest. So I think that's something that could be interesting in coaching is when do we say, hey man, if you think you have it, just launch it rather than trying to create with your feet. And trying to live another day. It's a difficult balance because obviously extended plays are also part of his bread and butter. We heard OC talk about it last week that scramble is his best play, and it's not even called. So it's a push and pull. But there were a couple times, including the last play of the game, where he got sacked. That if he just launched it, Zay was open, man. If he connects, it might have been a touchdown. That's how much separation he had. He had it yet again. Bateman on the other side had it too, but not as much. It's just stuff like that, man, where I'm just like, maybe that's something we need to focus on, is trying to hit those deep guys intentionally, even if protection breaks down.
It is something I feel like this offense is going to need to get better at as the season goes on. You're 100% right. There is a ton of value in the play where Lamar, just scrambles around and makes something happen. That's something that the Ravens have in their back pocket that not a lot of teams can. I mean, more teams are able to do that now with more and more athletic quarterbacks coming out. But still, I mean, Lamar does it better than probably any other quarterback in the league. I mean, the only other ones we're probably talking about in the discussion there are Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, right? And I would argue he's, more adept at that play than they are, despite that they also can do some pretty amazing things too in that situation. But yeah, I mean, when you're looking at playoff football, those plays are great. But if you're in a game where, let's say, you're going up against the Bills or you're going up against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and you get into a situation where the defense just isn't able to stop those attacks, because as good as the defense is, you're going up against an elite offense. Sometimes the elite offense gets the better hand, even against a Ravens defense. In that case, you're going to need to be able to do the big air yard plays, right? You're going to need to be able to do several of those quickly to keep pace in those types of games. And I think Lamar can do it, but like you're saying, and I think you bring up a good point that I don't think I'd really thought about it quite from that angle. Of course, with his ability, he's going to try and do the scrambling because he knows that he can make something happen there. But yeah, the deep ball right now is just so rusty, and I think the throw to Bateman that was the first interception basically says everything that you need to know about the state of the deep passing game right now. It's just out of sync, and just hopefully something that they can focus on. You got 2 more games till the bye week. Hopefully during the bye week, that's can be a point of emphasis. But yeah, 2 important games against 2 offenses that you may need to be in shootouts to keep pace with against. So it's going to be critical in the coming games.
I think another thing that's kind of like troubling about the whole setup is that they were playing cover 1 a lot. That's like something where you can really attack the boundaries, attack the sideline, and try to get that big play. So like they had the looks to take a shot that were like not too risky, right? And that I think that's what makes me burn a little bit more, is like when you go up to the line, single high, super clear, and no one drops, they're coming at you, you have people in your face, like you should be able to trust that your guy's going to be there. And I think that's something that they definitely should work on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and Bateman's getting the looks. Like that was completely obvious to me at the stadium last week or 2 weeks ago against Seattle. Like, he's beating the coverage. If they can connect on that's there. Like, Bateman will be able to make those plays.
It made me laugh because basically every time Alec was set a play on the field, if there's not a safety in Bateman's side of the field, he's like, Bates open. The play hasn't even started yet. He hasn't even snapped the ball. He's like, nah, he's open.
I was surprised I had to add that on to his take. I thought he was going to do it.
Bates always open.
Always
I
open.
had to put that in there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's. I mean, definitely agree with you guys. It's got to be a point of emphasis for this team, though. Going into the bye week, it's just it's one of those schematically, it's like that's the run game's not working. Like that's the way to attack it, and we know Lamar's got the arm strength. We know the guys have the ability. We're definitely not hitting enough of those. So it's got to happen one way or the other. So I feel like the only other thing I wanted to talk about for the offense was. I guess for Keaton, just do we think his hamstring's acting up? And what do we kind of think with him? Kind of not being a factor in the second half of the game. Was it something? I feel like it couldn't have been like play related. I mean, obviously he dropped the wheel route in the end zone, but like it would have been a big play if he did make it. But I mean, it wasn't one of those where I'm like, man, you had to have that. Like, we're not playing you. Doesn't really make too much sense. Injury's got to be the only one for me that really kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That was a tough play. That was a tough play for any player to make. So I would doubt he got benched for that. Harbaugh was asked that question specifically at the press conference afterwards, and he said something along the lines of, that was just the way that it went as far as play calling. He said it wasn't injury related. It was just the game. I reading between the lines, it was just that the game, he wasn't in the game plan going forward from that, which is kind of curious because, we saw against Seattle in this game against Cleveland, he really just seemed to be out there for there seemed to be a Keaton package, right? When he was out, when he was out there, the play was going to him. It was schemed up for him to do something with the football. But against Seattle, we saw him go in there and take multiple carries and have a lot of success. Granted, of course, that was at a time when the Ravens were up by multiple scores and Seattle wasn't showing any life back. So I don't know. Maybe it's a trust thing. Maybe they just don't trust him yet, being a rookie in that situation, which still is odd. I don't know. It was odd. He's clearly a playmaker. It feels like, give him a try in the actual offense. You don't need to just have him in as a gimmick, but certainly curious and something to watch going forward. I don't think it had an impact on whether or not the Ravens won or lost the game, but certainly we all want to see Keaton get more touches going forward.
Yeah.
Maybe a pass blocking thing as well.
Could be. Yeah, that could be it.
Yeah, it certainly could be pass blocking. I think it's curious that Harb says like something along the lines of like, we're trying to like ease him in. He's a rookie. And I'm like, surely he knows the playbook, right? So then the question comes down to like, do you trust him to run the plays? And I don't know, man. Like, I feel like running backs have been running these plays their whole life. It's one thing for maybe some of the passing plays, but even still, like, come on, man. That kind of trust thing kind of kills me a little bit because I don't feel like they're asking running backs specifically to do anything too crazy. I mean, it's kind of like a lineman, right? Could you imagine telling a lineman, he doesn't know the whole playbook yet? We're going to sub him out for certain plays? Like, they don't do that because they expect linemen to know everything. And I just kind of blows my mind that they have that kind of a approach with Keaton at the moment. So I hope that, they test that his knowledge of the playbook is robust and they put him in there and they let him cook because he is explosive. It's undeniable. And he gives the offense a spark that I would kind of push back. It's like that guy, good things happen when he's on the field and involved. And I think the more that happens, the more good things happen, the more we score, like that's all goodness. So until proven otherwise, like I feel like Keaton Mitchell is somebody that needs to get more and more touches until, it feels like we should dial it back. Speaking on touches, OBJ, he made the most of his touch. He got that slant to the house, but his touches were way down and Bateman's were way up. So they listened on that one. So, the one winning pod bump is occurring. We're starting to see our influence, man.
Could be. I think also that was kind of the obvious route of playing going forward, given, what we've seen from, I don't think it was a unique take at all, but hey, sure. I'll give us credit there until someone refutes that.
So OBJ, you're going to be working on putting that football high in sight now?
Oh my gosh.
Let's hope that bump happens next.
Yeah, right. I support that bump.
Once Bateman, yeah. Once Bateman has a game with double-digit targets, then we'll really know that they're listening. Odd.
Yeah, I thought that was cool, though. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the olive jar with Zay when he got his first touchdown, and they're still shaking it. But for OBJ, it's been a little bit of a waterfall, So who knows? Maybe there'll be another touchdown next week. Love to see it.
Just love to see a win. Just love to see a win. I don't think the Ravens are in must-win territory yet, but I think we're in. This game coming up would be a very big depressive bummer if they lose,
dude.
That's
it would be. Yeah, it would not be fun. I do feel like at the end of the day, like obviously the AFC North, I think it's a good division, but like I'm just having a hard time seeing the Steelers and the Browns. Like I feel like they have to drop a few more games. Like I don't see this division having like 4 teams that have more than 10 wins.
Yeah, the math is certainly not on the Steelers side. That's for certain.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys remember. I was thinking back on this a little bit. 2014, around this time, I'm pretty sure the AFC North set a record for the highest win percentage collectively of a division at that point, because all 4 teams had a winning record. I can't look back at this specific. I feel like at one point, at this point last year, it was like the Steelers were 8-2 and everyone else was 7-3. Us, Cincinnati, and Cleveland. So it's feeling a little bit like that. But yeah, I mean, how that ended. I mean, obviously we made the playoffs, and then it was Pittsburgh because we were in Pittsburgh. But I don't think Cincy or Cleveland definitely didn't. Cleveland fell off a cliff that year. I remember that.
For 2014. Yeah.
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 Let's see, what were the final standings? Final standings were Pittsburgh 11-5, Cincinnati 10-5-1, us 10-6, and then Cleveland went on a 6-game loss streak to finish the season at 7-9. So, okay, since he did make the playoffs that year, so you did have 3 teams from the North in 2014. That division though was also helped by, I think all of us collectively may have swept the NFC South. The NFC South was just awful that year. And we were paired up with them.
That was the year like the 7-9 team made the playoffs, right?
7-8-1 Carolina Panthers won that division. Yep.
That's the year.
Can't even give them the 9. They had to tie it.
Yep. That was a year. They even won their playoff game, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they did actually.
The Vikings missed a field goal or something like that.
That was like what I remembered is like they like also snuck a win in the playoffs. So
yeah. If you expand the postseason enough, crazy stuff happens. That was also Beastquake Seahawks. They were 7-9.
Oh wow!
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That game where Marshawn Lynch scored that touchdown while there was a minor earthquake going on. Apparently, that was they were 7-9, beat the Saints. So just get into the postseason, man. Just get in the postseason. Anything can happen.
That's definitely true. I think in order to get to the postseason, we got to get our tackle situation figured out. With Moses down and then Stanley getting hurt mid-game, apparently week to week, so or day to day. So that's interesting. Hopefully he's okay. Designated as a knee injury, but he got rolled over, man. And then you had Falele. That was actually the biggest surprise to me was that Falele played left and McCary played right. They didn't flip him. I thought surely they would flip him, and yeah, that was tough. I think maybe this week they flip him if they know going in that to be the case, but it was definitely a very, very interesting turn of events. And even though we are going to see a Bengals team that might have some injuries on their defensive line that, or defensive front that might make it less scary, having backups at tackle is always scary. There's such a drop off in the NFL when your backups come in that, we're spoiled by McCary, but we're reminded by Falele.
Yeah, I'm hoping that was just a call. They just wanted to keep McCary at right because that's where he had been during the game. So they felt that was best for continuity. And then, when Zeitler went down, have some more vet presence on the right side. But we'll see. We'll see what they do against the Bengals.
Special teams? We want to talk special teams?
Yeah, you had double agent James Prochet trying to make us win the game. I thought we were going to win it after that. We scored a touchdown, by the way, after that. It took 11 plays to get 17 yards. There were so many penalties, so much trash, and honestly, probably the most embarrassing thing I've seen the Ravens do all year was scoring a touchdown after all that crap. I'm like, this is the reason that you lost the game, guys. If it takes you 11 plays, charity of penalties, and to get 17 yards and a touchdown, come on, man. I felt like that was the sum of the whole offensive performance. Just really poor, but appreciate Double Agent O'Shea. Him and Duve stare off. That was wild. Same draft class, fighting for snaps their whole life. It's a storyline.
Yeah, that was almost cinematic. That happened there. That was crazy, man. Yeah. So that was a plus on special teams. Unfortunately for the rest of the special teams, I don't feel like Stout was the sharpest he'd been. Had a couple touchbacks. Didn't really have any punts of note from what I can recall. He might have. Just the ones that sailed into the end zone just stuck stronger in my mind for whatever reason. And of course, unfortunately, we had another block kick by Tucker. We started talking about this after the Arizona game. Is that something that's on Tucker's launch angle? Is that something that's just an issue we're having with that team, the blocking team over the past 2 years? Not sure, but it's certainly pretty frustrating to see because we know that Tucker still has the accuracy to do it. He still hasn't missed from under 50 this year, has missed very few. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but it's in the very low digits of kicks he's missed under 50 yards over the past few seasons. Just having some difficulty, just way too many blocks over the past 2 years. We might be up. Are we up to 5? I think it might be up to 5 at this point.
Yeah, I believe so. And it doesn't help when they do an overloaded front and then the guys just don't account for the players properly. With block, easy block. You know, if you whip a block up on the line, it's pretty easy for them to block the kick, and that's what we saw. And again, you know, those points really matter. They really matter. We didn't get the touchdown from Zay. We didn't get the field goal there. You lose by 2. Feels bad, man. I mean, they missed their own field goal, so maybe it's a tie. Maybe you go to overtime, but it's just these are the ways that you beat yourself. But also, like I said at the top, felt like the Browns just played really well in this game. Tip your hat, and it's a learning moment for this team, no doubt.
Well, with that, we come to our section. We don't want to be here, but we have to do it anyway. Moral Victory Awards. And you know what? I feel like I'll go first, but I feel like I got to give it to the guy you just mentioned, Double Agent Zero Crochet. Thank you for muffing that kick. It's a huge play. Obviously, I could give it to Duvernay too for an awesome recovery, despite the despite the laundry and the offense slugging it in to finally get that touchdown afterwards. It was a huge play. I agree with you, Alec. It could have really changed the game around, but alas, it wasn't to be. But still, thanks for thinking of us, Brochet.
Man, I do feel for the guy, though. I mean, jokes aside, like, that can't be fun. That can't be fun to just continually have that happen. Hopefully seeing a sports therapist or something, because he did not. The camera really lingered on him during the broadcast after that play, and he did not look good. So hopefully everything is going to be okay with him. But for my Moral Victory Award, you got to give it to Kyle Hamilton, right? I mean, even if it's just that play, that's a play that's going to be shown on his highlight reel throughout his career. Very Ed Reed reminiscent there. Just an absolute highlight play. And he had a decent game throughout the rest of it. I think, really, honestly, you could say everyone on defense had a good game. It was just, I think the problem in this game was just not every play in the second half. It seemed like someone messed up, even if they played well the rest of it. So Hamilton gets mine for this week. You got to give it to him after that play. He put that play on film.
Totally. And here's one for our listeners. I got yelled at apparently for not sharing this better, but Hamilton, if you bet his tackles in a game, has hit a lot this year. So it usually only pops up on Sunday. It's like pretty late in the process. Go on there, put some shingles on his tackling number over, and you'll be happy, most likely, if things continue. My moral victory goes to Owe. Almost, man. Almost Owe, but not almost. He actually got the strip sack, but that darn oblong called a football just didn't bounce the way we were hoping for. And I thought he played pretty well. I saw a couple good spins. I think that's clearly his new move that he added to the repertoire. And I think he's on the uptick, man. Keep an eye out for him against good old Orlando Brown next game. The classic trade, right? So we'll see. We'll see if he is able to succeed. Able to get the best of him. Always looking forward to that. So with that, of course, we'll be talking about the Bengals. Very quick turnaround. Love that for editing purposes. But we'll be back with Justin later in the week to talk about this matchup. A must-win game for the Ravens at the bank. It's blackout. Wear your black Ravens attire. And all three of us will be in attendance, which is always a great thing. Alice is going to be there too. So that she hasn't been there since 2019. She got to get a win for Alice. Yep. All right. So that's the more.
Coincidentally, not since it was the Bengals game in 2019.
There you go. So. We got to get the win.
A lot has happened since then.
Oh, so true, my friend. Well, we'll be back later in the week to talk about it. Go Ravens.